Hello and welcome to Beyond the Words. My name's Amanda Stoffer. I'm really excited to be back. This is my first podcast back from maternity leave. My co-host Bruno Combach has been holding down the fort in the time that I've been gone. And really happy to be here with our guest today, Teresa Toronjo. She's been working in languages for over a decade. She was first a language teacher before moving into localization management. Currently, she works at Malt, the freelance marketplace, and she also teaches courses in localization through Localization Academy. So welcome, Teresa. Very happy to have you. Just to start off, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what drew you to a career in languages?
Well, first of all, congratulations to you, and thank
Thank
you
you.
for inviting me. I am super happy to be here. Of course. So I have to say that I've been pretty lucky in my upbringing. My parents have been very supportive on telling me to go out and do things in other countries. And since I was 12, I've been going abroad every summer. And then when I was 15, I actually spent 1 year in the United States in a high school with an American family. And that was it for me. I learned the language. I learned about it was like being on a different planet completely. And after that, I couldn't stay put anymore. So I was continuously looking for opportunities to learn about languages, learn about cultures. That's why I studied translation and interpreting at the university. And then after that, I lived a little bit everywhere. So fun fact, I've lived in I'll say all this. Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark, also in the UK, in London for some time, in Germany twice, and also in Italy for quite a long time. So I moved a little bit everywhere. And like you said, I was teaching languages at the very beginning. I was also translating. So I've also seen the other side of the coin as a translator, specifically for research, for papers. And then after that, I went into the world of localization together with Kluk when I started at Kluk as a language specialist, then as a language lead for Europe, language lead for Southeast Asia, project management with Workday, and then now localization manager with Malt.
So that leads me to the next question, Teresa. What made you switch from teaching languages to localization, and what sort of overlap do you find in your teaching and localization career paths?
Well, I think because when I was teaching, I was also in a company that was called Wall Street English. And the thing about this company was that the courses were all online. So not everything, but there was a product basically. And this product was a big percentage of what the students were doing. And I got involved in an international project with this because they were going to revamp the entire experience. And then I started to talk with people in other countries and look what was going to work in Italy and what wasn't going to work in Italy. And then I thought, this is closer to what I studied than actually teaching the language itself. So it was more about how this company worked, that it pushed me towards localization, because I thought at the end of the day, when we get to teaching the language, teaching the culture, or doing the translation, very often we're too late. In the process, and we need to be sooner in the process. So the language experts, the culture experts, the localization experts, we need to be involved a lot sooner than we are. And this realization, I was like, okay, no, I want to try that, and that's how then I moved into localization.
And you're working. So now you're working at Malt, which is like a freelancer marketplace. And you mentioned you'd worked at Workday before, which I know is sort of, I know they do a lot of stuff. I've seen them that like they manage job applications for companies. So it's both sort of HR job searching related for different demographics, but like there's a bit of a through line there. And I'm wondering, in that sort of particular sector, in that particular industry, are there any sort of specific challenges that you've run into for localization that are sort of specific to that area?
So related to Workday, And here I think it's funny because for both companies, I lived similar situations in that when I joined Workday, I joined because I joined with the Peakon product. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's about employee satisfaction. And Workday had just bought Peakon. And when I joined Malt, Malt had just bought a company in Germany. So they were both doing like, not a transition, but like an acquisition. So that's always challenging. But in terms of localization, so there was like the challenge related to the acquisition and the merge. But on top of that, or like on the side, there is, in particular for Malt, a lot of compliance because we operate in so many markets. But we operate with freelancers that have to invoice and have to do payments, clients that have to do payments, we have to work with partners. So there is a huge component on compliance, to be honest. And for that, it even goes beyond localization to truly experts on compliance on specific countries and working very closely with them. That's like the biggest localization challenge that I see. And then on the other hand, you have making the product itself generic enough, but internationalized enough that it can resonate with anyone. So basically internationalization on the other side. So you have the hyper localization in terms of compliance. You cannot fake that. You have to work hard for that. And then on the other hand, you have the internationalization, not saying you don't have to work, but it's a complete different opposite type of work where you try to generalize as much as possible and automate as much as possible to create the feeling that it was tailored for the user. So there's that, and everything in between, of course. And for Workday, I feel that Workday, the biggest challenge that I perceived, although of course being specifically for Peakon, maybe I didn't see everything, is that it's huge. So the localization team was so big. There were the complexity. It wasn't even about the industry itself. It was more about the complexity of the processes, the amount of people involved, and of course the speed. So how fast can you be when you have a team of 150 people with 50 plus engineers dedicated to localization, PMs, in-house linguists. So yeah, it was impressive to see and to experience, that's for sure.
Something I was really interested in when you talked about hyper-localization, how important is it to work with subject matter experts in this field? I'm talking about like linguists who also know about all the compliance elements in the business.
It's really important, right? And I mean, not if you don't want to think about the human side of things, what type of experience you give to the user, because you think, I mean, you shouldn't, but some people do think that way. Then you need to think about at least the economic impact from a financial point of view. You need to be careful because when a freelancer or a company is signing up into your platform and it's saying this is the type of company that I have, and you didn't do your homework, and then they say this is what they are, it can cause them problems and in turn can cause problems for you as well as a company. So it's really, really, really important that the translators that you work with, they put in the work to do this. And in fact, we're, as we speak, working hard on compliance and on localizing that for all the markets that we work with. So, and I see translators talking with each other and like, hey, I know that this is for Germany. Can you help me with it? And it's the French translator talking with the German one, or the French translator asking the person that did the English, hey, what did you mean by that? Because I think that's not right, and you see all these interactions and, they're working to provide the best content. And it just, for example, a machine translation wouldn't be able to do this kind of work.
It's great as well that you've got this sort of cross-language communication, which doesn't happen very often. I mean, we try and do that also internally where, if somebody spots a potential error or a potential interpretation challenge, we try and share it with everyone so that also, not only can you benefit from everybody's input, but also make sure that you're consistent throughout your languages. So it's quite rare that what you're saying in in this sort of especially client side.
The thing is, because we work with very few languages today, we still can do that. So we're in a privileged position to do that because we only work with English, which is our source, and then 4 other languages. And because our volumes are going up, but not so fast that we can't have very curated group of freelancers working for our translations. So they are all together in one group, and we meet, and I do one-on-ones with them, and I treat them like if they were in-house. And like I said, this is like a benefit that we have that we can still do today because of the size of the content and the setup that we have. But in the future, it will be more challenging because as we add more languages, as the volume goes up, then, we have to think about this.
Yeah. Well, which leads me to the next question, actually, because I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you said that for the content that you manage, it has to feel like tailor-made for the final user, which I suppose is the North Star for everyone who works in localization. But how do you achieve this? And not only for the languages you speak, because at the end of the day, if you see something coming in Spanish, you think, okay, maybe we could, make it work a bit harder. But for the languages that you don't speak, so how do you manage to reach that goal?
You trust the experts that you have, right? And it's difficult. I was teaching a localization manager course recently, and I had some students ask, being very anxious, what if the quality is not good? I don't know, I don't speak the language. And then I was like, there's only so much you can do, and there is a lot of quality assurance and quality control that you can do. So you have your glossaries, you have your style guides, you curate your translation memory, you onboard the right people, you dedicate the time to making sure they know about the product. You keep them updated about the changes. You do one-on-ones with them so they feel that they're part of your team. You give them a backup that they can work with. You let them have conversations between themselves. But at the end of the day, if you don't speak the language, you have to trust that your process is robust enough to, to produce a good quality. Of course, if there's nothing, then it's just a game of chance. And then, of course, being very open to feedback, making sure that that you're also very good at understanding what is opinion versus real issues. And then also giving the freelancers the trust to make changes where necessary if they think it's what they need to do. Because, of course, if you always want to control the narrative and you always want to control everything, you limit a lot what the translators, I'm not going to say translators, say language and culture specialists can do, or the linguists can do, because they will be afraid. They will be afraid that if they change the meaning, you're going to go to them and say, hey, but you changed the meaning and you shouldn't have, So it's also about how you provide this feedback, how you filter this feedback, and how you train and educate the people providing the feedback on what good feedback is and what isn't. So with your internal stakeholders, and that's not easy because everyone has an opinion.
Yeah, it's like the national football team, everybody's the team manager.
I wanted to ask about one of the things that you mentioned there was onboarding the right people, and I think a lot of the stuff that follows on from that you were talking about in terms of giving and receiving feedback, a lot of that relies on trust after having onboarded the right people. So how do you go about that, about the choosing who to onboard?
So there are, of course, let's say, business-oriented constraints, and then there are also other things that you need to take into account. So of course you need to look at the budget that you have. You also need to, or in my case, but there is in the course that I just did, there was an entire 2 hours dedicated to that. So I will just be very concise, but just to say it's not easy because there are many factors that you need to take into account, whether you are onboarding an LSP or whether you're onboarding individual contributors. In our case, because we're still small, we can afford to have individual contributors, but the same is true if you're looking for an LSP, you need to also consider these things, right? So one of the things, the budget, of course, another thing is the feeling on the communication, that I give that a lot of value. So if I feel that the person is communicating very effectively with me, That is for me a really important thing, because at the end of the day, there are many translators or many companies that can provide similar services, but how well they support you in your journey, that changes a lot, and it varies a lot from one person or from one company to another. So that's something that for me is really important. Another thing that I considered is the availability or the capacity, in this case, when you work with people, so with freelancers, but also when you work with an LSP, you need to be very clear, very upfront. When do you expect things to happen? Because if the person says, look, I don't have that type of capacity, availability, or as a company, you're like, that's not something that I can guarantee. I prefer that. Like, I value that transparency better than someone telling me, yeah, I can do it. And then, the results are not there. I prefer someone to say, look, can we negotiate that? Be a little bit slower. So also that, like that people are open and that they tell you what you can expect. And then I of course always send a test. And when I send tests, I am very thorough. So I always add, for example, ICU syntax. So keys with ICU syntax. Then I add, when I have the glossary, and then I add mistakes to the English. So it can be typos, but it can be inconsistencies with the glossary. Then I also have translation from scratch translation, but I also have reviews of previous translations that somebody else did. So I put like very different types of content, things so I put like a lot of traps, if you will. So if you're a freelancer and you're listening to this and you ever do a test with me, I guess now you know. But basically, because you're looking for someone, whether it's a company or whether it's an individual contributor, that cares not only about their language, but also about the quality of the source that they are receiving. So they provide valuable feedback also about the input, so about the source as well. And then I really like when they break the mold a little bit, and they propose things that are a little bit more localized, bolder, where they say, look, this is just not going to work for my market. Can we change it to this? And I really, really, really give a lot of points for that. So that's how I go about it. But like I said, 2 hours condensed in 2 minutes. So
So we want to talk a bit about the elephant in the room with the industry, which is AI. And I wanted to ask first about how has it changed your work in terms of the localization management itself? I know that you were talking earlier about that you do a lot of compliance, and that also that you have these freelancers that are sort of talking to each other and interacting, which like neither of those things can really happen if you're just using AI on its own. So can you talk a little bit about how it's changing your work?
So first of all, I want to start by saying that it's not that I don't believe that AI can help a lot the work that we do, but I think we need to be very critical of where we use AI, and what type of AI we use, because then we have AI and then we have Gen AI. So it's also like a lot of people say AI, and then they mean both. But I think, I also need to be specific there. And then, of course, it doesn't work for all types of content. It doesn't work for all industries. It doesn't work for even within the same type of content for every feature, for example, within a product. So lots of considerations there, but I would say in general, just before this call, I was setting an automation, and this goes hand in hand with something that I think I mentioned earlier. AI is pushing us to be more strategic. So it's accelerating everything so much because the expectations are going are increasing so quickly. It's like before, when we could prove that we were saving money with machine translation, everyone was like, or with a translation memory, and now it's like, that's the minimum that we expect. That's, you should be doing that already. What else can you do? And they expect full automations, and they expect that you can check the quality with AI, and they expect that that the human doesn't need to touch anything, and they expect that the context should be available automatically, and they expect a lot. And it's changing the work, and that it's pushing everything to move a lot faster. It's improving, in my opinion, it's improving my work because I'm just me. So it's just one person. It's a one-person team, which means that the more I automate, the more time I have for more strategic topics. And in fact, if I went through the entire journey that I did at Malt, from the very beginning, the things that I was doing to today, the things that I am doing, that's only possible because of AI. However, that's not to say content, because content, it's only a small part of what AI can do for the localization industry. There is a lot related to processes. There is a lot related to automation. There is a lot related to content creation, of course, yes. So in terms of content, we use it because we have to, but I still believe that you can tell when something was done with AI and nobody touched it. Maybe that will change in the future, and we will talk in 2 years again, and I will have changed my opinion on that. But today, if I read something that a machine wrote, 99.9% of the times, whether it's a LinkedIn post, whether it's a document that a colleague shared with me, I can tell, like, okay, AI wrote this. And I'm not saying that the quality is bad. I'm saying that the user feels that. The user feels that there is a disconnect between the content and themselves. And there is like a little gap there that when a human does it, when a human creates that content, then they don't feel that. So I hope that was like a comprehensive enough question. Maybe you have like follow-up questions on some things, but.
Absolutely, because you were talking about Gen AI there, so AI generating content based on prompts. What I'm interested in is your experience in AI-driven machine translation with post-editing, and your experience of that, and how important the human element is in that process.
Crucial. Of course, depends on the type of content. I'm not going to say that if you have internal, content to train your staff internally, that a human needs to check it and put on a lot of work in there. No, that's not what I'm saying. But and this is something that I say a lot, but I'm going to say it here as well, because I think it's really important that everyone hears this. It's that clients, stakeholders, and you know what I'm going to say, clients and stakeholders, the difference between what clients and stakeholders think that AI can do and what AI can actually in reality do is big. So the clients think we're here, up here, and the reality is down here. And there is a big gap. And now I see, as in our company, for example, there is a lot of education on AI. Stakeholders are learning more about AI and how AI works. And now there is backpedaling. It's like, wait a minute, no. Now we understand what the complexity is. And now they are realizing that the expectations in some cases are not realistic. And therefore, then having said that, I heard a lot at the beginning of the AI hype last year. Let's just automate it. Let's just translate it with an LLM. Let's just translate it, and then a human can check it, or not, depending, right? The reality is that if you don't train your own machine translation, or if you don't train your own LLM model, and for that you need to have very clean content, a very clean data set, then the results are not there yet. Which means, it doesn't mean you cannot do it. It means there needs to be an investment. And I don't think stakeholders and some clients, I don't think they are aware of this. And in order for you to do that, you need specialists. Whether it's a company, whether it's a consultancy, whether it's a specific linguist that can help you with that, the reality is that first, you need to clean your data set. First, you have to make sure that everything is, that you have a very clear vision of what your content needs to look like. And that means style guides, that means glossaries, that means tone of voice. And this might not be the same for all your types of content. So do you have it for everything? Do you have it for the marketing content? Do you have it for your blogs? Do you have it for your transactional emails? Do you have it for your financial emails? Do you have it for your product content? Do you have it for your compliance content? Do you have it for your help center articles? And then when you have all that, and it probably people are already thinking the what? But it is true. If you don't have all that, then what the machine translation or what the LLM translation is going to, the output is going to be the same as company B, company C, and company D. And you're not going to differentiate yourself from anyone else. So if you don't put in that effort, if you don't put in that work, then, or you have the human fixing everything so it actually follows your guides and your tone of voice and everything, or you cannot do it just with machine translation or LLMs if you don't put all that work into it. And for that, you need a human also checking the output and correcting the prompts, correcting the guidelines, correcting the style guides, correcting the glossaries. And so you need the human, whether if it is because you're making this based investment in order to be able to use machine translation or LLMs for translation, or whether it is because you're using what you have now. For example, at Malt, we don't have enough volume to train. We need a human to check after because the data that we have today doesn't let us train. So, but you need to be aware of that. And I don't think a lot of clients and users are aware of the amount of work that goes into this, and the amount of knowledge that you need to have and that you need professionals to help you with this. This is not a do-it-yourself kind of scenario.
Yeah, I thought it's really interesting what we just said, and I like the fact that you say tone of voice, style, the register as well. Register is different for social media than for a white paper or even an email. And what I'd like to have your opinion on is also the quality, because AI still can't judge the quality of the source. And as you know, unfortunately, the quality of the source is not always up to scratch. And basically, in our experience, AI will reproduce all the flaws of the source. If the source is badly structured, if it's unclear, etc., all these flaws will be reproduced, which makes the human element even more important, because the human element or humans can judge the quality. What is your experience in that field?
I think there is a big gap in the industry. I think there is an opportunity there in the industry for the source. A lot of tools, in particular, they are like, oh no, we take it from the source needs to be ready, and then we have features, and we have I haven't seen, maybe if you are listening to this and you have a solution for me, reach out. But I haven't seen so far a tool where the English is part of the process, where you're also reviewing the English and making sure that, for example, even with AI or Gen AI, you are improving your source before you go into translation. In our case, again, we have the opportunity to do this with one person. So we have an external collaborator. She's fantastic. And she proofreads most of our English for product. And she provides advice because she also knows about localization and UX writing. So she's really good. And so she provides that. But if you don't have that, that step, then it's really difficult, because you have and more people generating content with AI without really knowing the language very well. So they think the English says what they want it to say, and then they put it in there, and then that's not what it means. And then when they see the translations, they're disappointed because it's not what they meant to start with. So I think there is a big gap there between the source and the, let's say, translations. And I agree with you that the translation and the LLMs will reproduce the mistakes of the English, but I also see an opportunity there to say, okay, what types of content need the source? Because if I am going to generate the English, for example, with prompts, or I'm going to give someone a brief and I'm going to generate the English, can I just generate from scratch the content in other languages instead of going through the English, which will, of course, bias the output on other languages? And that's another, big opportunity out there in the market. Can you plug that into your system? Can you plug that into your solution, where I don't want the translation of the English? I want you to analyze the English, tell me what the aim is, what the objective is. I will give you, the brief of the person that generated the English, and I want you to regenerate that, but in other languages or for other markets. So I don't want the translation. I want it localized. So yeah, that's but yeah, definitely I do feel that there is like a gap there for the English, definitely. And I do feel that that's also going to lead to people thinking about whether we need the English for some types of content, or whether if we're going to generate, we generate directly in other languages.
Yeah, I think especially because we've had instances with clients sometimes where with the English source, there will have been layers and layers of sign off and so many people reviewing it. And then they think that they can just have AI do the translation and it'll be fine without having those same layers of reviewers. Even for, I think we had one client who's recently talking about their local stakeholders wanted to use AI to just immediately translate taglines where people probably spent hours like arguing over which prepositions to use. Yeah, I wanted to know sort of everything that you've just been saying. How do you talk about this stuff to the students that you teach in the localization management courses? Because I'm sure it's something that they have a lot of questions about.
About AI, you mean?
Yes.
Well, you have to, right? Because otherwise they are not going to be ready for their reality. I divide it into sections. So I touch on AI, for example, on the course that we had last week, 2 weeks ago, we had different sections. So there is one about workflows. So when we were talking about workflows, we were talking about automation. Then we were talking about project management. Again, there we were talking about the tools and what. So we had a section also about tools, and there I talked about AI. We had a section about project management. And within the tool that we had already seen, which were the features that the tool could give you, or other tools that were external that you could plug into that tool. What options could it give you as a project manager? Then we looked at quality. And there on the quality part, again, we saw the different options that there were. Also external providers, all the different flows. And then we did a day on budget and data. And there the exercise was, if you have all this volume and you have all these types of content, what type of process are you going to use depending on the type of content, so that you also, because we need to start thinking this way as localization experts, prioritizing and making sure that the right type of content goes through the right type of flow. And then there are other type of content that will benefit less from a human review. So that's the way in which we were looking at it, like, okay, there is AI, there are a lot of options there to improve your flows in the tool itself, to improve your project management, to improve your quality. But then at the end of the day, once you have the content of a company, once you have the processes in a company, how do you actually use it to improve your process, but without impacting the budget, right? Because that's the other side of the coin. AI is free, right? But it isn't. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, it's not free. So, and I have the feeling that a lot of people still have not realized this is not free for us. It's not free for the environment. So we are using our resources for AI. So every time you ask a question, yeah. You're using the resources of our world. And I don't think people have, not everyone has gotten there yet, which is a little bit sad. And so there is the other side, right? It's not that because we do everything with AI, it's free. There's an investment of your time to set everything up. There is an investment on the tooling that you use. There is an investment on the units that you consume, or if you don't want to call units, you call them tokens that you consume. And those tokens that you're consuming, units that you're consuming, they are not, you're not only being charged money for that, the world is paying for that as well. Mm-hmm. So is it really important for you to translate the same content 10 times with machine translation over and over and over again because you have an automation that just pushes the content and you don't care? It's like, okay, well, maybe you don't care, but the planet, mm-hmm. The planet does. And on top of that, like I said, you also foot the bill, and people think it's free, but it's not. And not to talk about what I said before, if you want the LLM or the machine translation to provide good output, there is a huge investment up front. It's a huge investment on creating the resources, on training the models, And then once they are trained on looking at the output and checking and correcting and iterating until you have a quality that is good and the tone of voice that is good and the results that you want. And even then, your company will evolve, the tone of voice might evolve, things might evolve, and you need to keep it. You need to keep it continuously updated. So it's not, once I always put this example and people look at me like I'm saying something horrible, but and I think in the world of translation and localization, we see it a lot with project managers, for example. It's like once you translate something or once you publish something, it's like a baby, it's like a kid. When you have a kid, it's only starting.
Mm-hmm.
That's the beginning. It's not the end. That is the beginning. You have a kid and that's the beginning. Now you have to raise them and you have to make sure that they have everything that they need. And you want to make sure that you're making the right choices for them. Well, the same goes if you are training an LLM, if you're training your machine translation, if you are launching a new product, if you are translating into a new market, that's only the beginning. Once you've done all that preparation and whatever it is that you were working on, it's live, then there is an investment of your time forever. And it's not the same, I know, but are you prepared to put in the work after that? Because it's not, okay, and now we move on to something else. No. And now you're responsible for whatever until you don't use it anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, the importance of nurturing. Well, thank you so much, Teresa, for all your insights on the industry, and I'm glad to see that we have the same position and face the same issues in the same way, kind of thing. And well, we have one final question. It's a question we ask all our guests. You've lived in so many countries. I don't know how many languages do you speak at the moment, apart from Spanish and English, obviously.
I speak Spanish, English, Italian, and Dutch.
And Dutch. Wow, wonderful. Dutch must be pretty tough.
My husband is Dutch, so my daughter is now she's 3.5. She's bilingual, so I have to speak Dutch because
Okay, so yeah, that's probably a little easier now. But if you were to learn a new language, which one would it be, and why?
I would be torn between French because I work for a French company and I feel that I could bring a lot of value if I learned French. A lot of my colleagues are French and I would like to speak with them in their own language because you get a different idea of how people are depending on the language that you speak. Yeah. So I would like to get to know them better and I think French would be the right vehicle. On the other hand, if I didn't have the French thing, I would go for like a complete different language and probably Japanese, just because everything is so different. Also the way the thinking process related to the language and everything. And I think culture is very ingrained as well on their language. So I would love to experience that. But like go and live there, right, for a few years and then experience the language and the culture together. Definitely.
Yeah. You must be the sort of third or fourth person who says Japanese. It's a very popular language.
Well, if you're out there and you know how to teach Japanese, we're giving you the perfect opportunity to start a business now. We will be your students. But yeah.
Fantastic.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Teresa. And yeah, thanks very much.
No, thank you for inviting me. It was great. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.